What is going on, friends? Welcome to My Weekly Mixtape, the show that takes the classic mixtape approach to building a modern playlist. I'm your host, Brian Colburn, and so far this year, I have done a 2025 wrap-up with DT Carell of Space Castle, as well as a country roundup. Did you really think I was going to go into 2026 and not wrap up my favorite cover songs of 2025? No, that wasn't going to happen. So here we are. I have put together a list of 10 of my personal favorite cover songs that I think you need to check out this year or next year or any year for that matter, because these covers are all top-notch prime A. Now, let me get into why I'm such a fan of cover songs first and foremost. I know a lot of people think, well, you're just kind of taking someone else's music and re-recording it. That's not necessarily the case. One of the things I love about cover songs is you're taking another artist's art and reimagining it in your own voice, your own style. I'm not necessarily a fan of a color by numbers cover, meaning you're playing the song exactly as it was on the original album. Sometimes I'm okay with it, but I love to hear when artists bring what makes them unique as artists and puts their stamp on another song. And I think the songs that I've chosen tonight highlight that for the most part. There are a few that stay close to the original, but there's still nuances and flourishes of what I love about the covering artists that shine through on these versions. Now, here we are in December, and I've already seen tons of articles featuring 10, 20, 30, even 50 different cover songs. There are so many out there. I could have gone on for hours and hours and hours on this topic, but I always like to leave those volume 2s open for down the road. So 10 songs it is, but I also want to know what cover songs out there really move the needle for you this year. So please reach out to me, myweeklymixtape@gmail.com. You can also hit me up on almost all the social media haunts at My Weekly Mixtape. You can use the contact page at myweeklymixtape.com, or you can join the Mixtaper community at patreon.com/myweeklymixtape. I also like to ask, wherever you're listening, Apple, Spotify, YouTube, if you like what you're hearing on My Weekly Mixtape, please hit the subscribe button. Please leave a 5-star or thumbs up review and leave a comment about what you liked in the episode. It really helps spread the word about My Weekly Mixtape to other music fans out there. And then obviously, if you want to check out the full back catalog of My Weekly Mixtape episodes, as well as hear a playlist of all the songs I'm about to talk about tonight, as well as see their accompanying music videos, you can visit the episode page over at myweeklymixtape.com. So let's waste no time getting into these top 10, at least for me personally, cover songs of 2025. And I want to kick things off with a band that over on the My Weekly Mixtape Discord, we have talked a lot about. This is a group called Weekend Friends. Based out of Portland, Maine, their album Feels Like Hell, which was put out on Don Giovanni Records, has really made a lot of waves this year, and they have been touring all over the place, really putting some support behind this album. And at the end of it is a song that they've been covering live for a while now, and there's now a studio version of it, and it is of Edna Swap's Torn. Now, there might be some of you that are sitting there going, who is Edna Swap? Well, Edna Swap is the group that recorded this song called Torn that a few years later was made popular by the one and only Natalie Imbruglia. Yes, I'm talking about that Torn. I'm all out of faith. This is how I feel. Cold and I am shamed, lying naked on the floor. You know the exact song I am talking about. Now, this is a song that a lot of people don't even realize. The hit version by Natalie Imbruglia was a cover. All the way back in season 1, there was the Wait, That's a Cover Song episode that I did with Jay Sweet. Spoiler alert, this is one of those songs, because a lot of people, when I mention Edna Swap, they don't know who I'm talking about. But as soon as I mention Natalie Imbruglia, there it is. They know exactly what I'm talking about because she's the one that put the song on the map internationally for fans all over the world. Now, Torn has been covered by a lot of groups. Neck Deep did a version about 10 years ago. 20 years ago, a group called Off by One did a fast pop punk version of it. There are tons of covers of this song. However, Weekend Friends version really drives this 90s, I don't want to call it grunge because that might be pigeonholing the song a little more than I want to, but there is a grunge vibe to their version. It is sludgy. It is slowed down and it is deliberate in its delivery. And I think it's extremely powerful for that. Now, the average listener is going back and thinking about Natalie Imbruglia's pop version, where it's very light, very fluffy. I don't want to use the word saccharine because that almost sounds like a negative. I love Natalie's version. I think it's a great song. Edna Swap's version is a little bit more alternative rock. So it still has that lighter feel, but it's definitely more driving than Natalie's version. And the other ones I mentioned, Neck Deep and Off by One, are definitely leaning more towards the punk side of things. This version by Weekend Friends leans towards Edna Swap's original, but slows it down and really draws out the emotion of the lyrics. And the delivery of this is both powerful and, dare I use the word, haunting. Her vocal delivery on this track demands you stop what you're doing and listen to what she has to say. And this was one that as soon as I heard it said, this is definitely making my top cover songs of 2025, even though they had been playing it live prior to 2025, because Feels Like Hell came out this year. It makes the list and is definitely one I highly recommend checking out. The entire album is a banger. If you haven't heard Weekend Friends, you are going to be hearing about them in 2026 because this album has lit a fire under the rocket that has been kind of exploding for them all throughout 2025. So kicking things off tonight, Weekend Friends cover of Edna Swap's Torn. And I think I'm going to follow that up with one that, for me at least, is fresh on my mind because just a few weeks ago, I had the honor and privilege of having Jared Reddick of Bowling for Soup on My Weekly Mixtape to talk about 30 years of pop punk humor, heart, and debauchery, all things Bowling for Soup. I highly recommend you go back and check out that episode if you haven't heard it already. But during that discussion, we talk about the band's approach to cover songs. And they've done a lot over the years. They have an entire album dedicated to cover songs. That's called Don't Mind If We Do, and it came out in 2023. And one of the things we talk about, I don't want to give too much away, is the fact that Jared could hear a song and immediately know that they need to put their spin on it. And one of the songs that they released in 2025 is a cover of Taylor Swift's Actually Romantic from The Life of a Showgirl. Now, that album came out in October of 2025. And the beauty of modern music, as this is something that could not have happened 20 and 30 years ago, in November of 2025, Bowling for Soup's cover dropped. The fact that you could take a song that is still just starting to generate a buzz and put your spin on it almost immediately is a side of the music industry in the last decade that was never around in the 70s, 80s, 90s, and even early 2000s for that matter. You are able to hear a song and immediately get to work on your version of it if the song resonates with you. And Jared talks about how they did that back in 2023 covering Miley Cyrus's Flowers, which ended up on that covers album, and they're doing the same thing again here. But I want to be very clear, this isn't just Bowling for Soup re-recording Taylor Swift's song and releasing it. They're putting their own spin on it. This is, for all intents and purposes, a Bowling for Soup song that just happened to be written and recorded by somebody else a month earlier. So if you're a Taylor Swift fan or a Bowling for Soup fan, I highly recommend you check out Bowling for Soup's take on Actually Romantic, as well as my sit down with Jared Reddick from a few weeks ago. You will not be disappointed. And I think for the next song, I'm going to stick with the punk mindset However, I'm going to flip the script a little bit because Bowling for Soup did a punk cover of a song that wasn't a punk song. So now I'm going to go with a cover that was originally a punk song, but in this version, it's no longer a punk song. Although punk is a state of mind, not necessarily a sound. So this fingerstyle acoustic guitar version by Luca Striganoli is punk rock, regardless of he's doing it on an acoustic guitar or not. And this is a cover of Dropkick Murphys' I'm Shipping Up to Boston. Luca's style of playing is one that needs to be studied. And I hope sometime in 2026 that I can have him on the show to dive into the fingerstyle approach a little more in depth, because I am absolutely fascinated by fingerstyle guitar players. Now, when you listen to this track, I want you to immediately note that this is all done on a single guitar by one person live. There are no overdubs in fingerstyle guitar playing, at least on this track. There are some fingerstyle guitarists that do add other things and other elements to their studio recordings. But this is just Luca and a guitar, nothing else. So when you're hearing the beat, the melody, and the strumming, it's all happening from his two hands simultaneously. It is an art form. It is what 99% of the feeds that I have, if I'm scrolling on social media, pop up. Mind-blowing guitar playing. Stuff that I watch it and I have to watch it 2, 3, 4, 5 times in a row because I just can't imagine how someone's brain can make them do what they're doing to make the guitar sound that way. To make a single instrument sound and feel like an entire band. It is truly an art form in and of itself. And this is the kind of stuff that I don't think people talk about in the mainstream, but for certain, when these videos pop up on their For You feeds, they immediately share them. But I feel like artists like this deserve to be more in the mainstream spotlight because this is a style of music that takes a special kind of talent. And Luca is just that. He's put out several covers this year, and I was having a hard time deciding on which one to go with. However, because we did Weekend Friends and Bowling for Soup in the beginning, I felt kind of sticking with that punk theme was the way to go. However, he also does a cover of 50 Cent's In the Club. Yes, he does a hip-hop cover on acoustic guitar, and it's got just the same bounce and vibe as 50's original. And he also does Bruce Springsteen's Streets of Philadelphia on a triple-necked guitar. That one I have to advise you go watch the video for, because I cannot explain this guitar. You just need to see it for yourself. Words cannot do it justice. Just like my words cannot do Luca's playing justice. I'm Shipping Up to Boston is a killer Dropkick Murphys song, one of my absolute favorites. And Luca single-handedly made it just as punk rock on a single acoustic guitar. So following up Weekend Friends Torn and Bowling for Soup's Actually Romantic, I'm Shipping Up to Boston by Luca Striganoli. And while the next song kind of deviates away from punk a little bit, there's still going to be that punk rock spirit and mentality because this artist actually has produced a ton of punk and pop punk artists, such as the aforementioned Bowling for Soup, Avril Lavigne, American Hi-Fi, Quiet Drive, Fall Out Boy, Green Day, just to name a few in the punk world. And then outside of the punk world, he's produced artists like Billy Idol, The Struts, Weezer, Lit, Katy Perry, and Pink. And that's just scratching the surface. Alongside of his incredible resume of production work, he also fronts the Marvelous Three and has an incredible catalog of solo material. Yes, I am talking about Butch Walker, one of the premier producers on the planet, as well as an incredible musician who I would go on record to say is one of the most underrated songwriters in this modern era. Now, this year, Butch is covering an incredible band of musicians in and of itself. There's been a couple of tribute albums that came out in 2025. Not as many as I'd like to see. Now, I am a fan of tribute albums. The one that immediately jumps to mind, I think the biggest one this year would be the Can't Get Enough, a tribute to Bad Company that came out earlier this year. And while that came really close to making the list tonight, I actually am going to go with Let's Go Dancing, the songs of Drivin and Cryin, an Atlanta rock band that was formed by Kevin Kinney back in 1985. And just like Butch Walker, I think falls under that underrated category. Even though they had albums on Island Records and they were a major label group, there's still an underrated aspect to their career and their legacy. They blend hard rock, southern rock, a little bit of Americana, maybe some folky stuff in there. Kevin Kinney is such a prolific songwriter, and I am so glad that a bunch of artists came together to pay tribute to him and the songs of Drivin and Cryin. Now, Butch's contribution to this album is a cover of Fly Me Courageous, the title track to their 1990 album. If memory serves me correct, it is the band's highest charting single. Now, this cover features Jeff Sullivan, who was the drummer on the original recording of Fly Me Courageous, and this is probably the most faithful to the original cover that I have on my list today. Is it a color by numbers cover? No. There is definitely Butch's stamp on this song. However, by bringing Jeff Sullivan on board, the song is going to keep the original swing. So there is going to be some similarities to the original because he's the one who kept the groove on the original track, and that stays intact here. But Butch added his nuances to the song to really make it his own. And this is a song that I'm not sure everybody out there listening knows the original and knows the cover. So if you haven't heard Drivin for Cryin's Fly Me Courageous, please do yourself a favor and pick up that album. That is the perfect starter album for going down the Drivin and Cryin rabbit hole. And when you're done with that, start working your way down Kevin Kinney's discography. You will not be disappointed. But Butch Walker is always at the top of my list. He always brings something special to his covers. I've talked about his take on Taylor Swift's You Belong With Me in the past, and here we are once again with Butch Walker doing Butch Walker things and bringing the amped up energy to an already amped up classic Drivin and Cryin track. There is no way I could have done this episode tonight and not talked about this one. So closing out the first half of this 10 cover songs of 2025 playlist, I want to go with one that I talked about on the country episode of 2025, and that's somebody that I saw open for Shinedown earlier this year. Yes, I said country and I said Shinedown. So if you're intrigued by that statement, I highly suggest you go back and check out the episode just before this one, The Sound of Country 2025, 12 standout songs that define the year. Yeah, I had to add an extra 2 to that one. But if you are a country fan, this episode is for you. And if you're not a country fan, this episode is for you. Intrigued? Check it out and find out. But anyway, I spoke about this one artist in that episode, and I'm going to speak about her again. And I actually talked about this song for a little bit in that episode. So if you've heard that episode already, I might repeat a couple things here, but I'm coming up with this off the top of my head, so it might be all new. Regardless, Morgan Wade. Absolutely love her. Have been a fan since I first interviewed her with Jay Sweet back in the Tune Styles days, which that episode can be heard back in season 1. If you search the episode page at myweeklymixtape.com, that interview was recorded back before her debut album Wilder Days came out, but there's still a ton of great stuff that came out of that conversation, which is why I still recommend people still check it out here in 2025. But this year she released her newest album, The Party Is Over Recovered. And then a few months later, which I've talked about before, I'm not a big fan of doing the deluxe edition shortly after an album is released. However, on the deluxe edition of The Party Is Over, she put out a cover of Radiohead's Creep using a string section version. Now, compared to the original, the arrangement is similar. It is dialed back a little bit, and, well, it's got a string section in it, if Captain Obvious here. But this one, I really want to focus on her vocals. She took some liberties with the vocals that Thom Yorke doesn't do on the original track. She hits some high notes that Tom doesn't, even though he does hit the epic note at the end that it's just one of my favorite moments of 90s music, but I digress. Morgan's version, she hits some higher notes in the verses that gives these moments where it stands out from the original. Then in addition to that, the string section in it is just gorgeous. And it takes this song to a completely different level where it doesn't have the heft of Radiohead's original because it is stripped back. But even though there's no distortion and heft in that regard, it comes on the heels of her voice alone. And some of the lines she delivers gives me instant chills and makes the hair on my arm stand up when she's singing it. This is a really extremely powerful version of this song, my all-time favorite Radiohead song. Don't at me, please, if you're a Radiohead fan. I understand there's a lot of love or hate depending on where you stand in your Radiohead fandom, but this is my favorite Radiohead song, and Morgan Wade does it justice and then some. So as far as I'm concerned, the perfect way to close out this first half of the Sound of Cover Songs 2025, which kicked off with Weekend Friends Torn, originally recorded by Edna Swap, followed up by Bowling for Soup's Actually Romantic, originally recorded by Taylor Swift, Luca Striganoli, I'm Shipping Up to Boston, originally recorded by Dropkick Murphys, Butch Walker featuring Jeff Sullivan, Fly Me Courageous, originally recorded by Drivin and Cryin, and Morgan Wade's Creep, originally recorded by Radiohead. Head over to myweeklymixtape.com to hear all the songs I've discussed in this mix through the playlist embedded on the episode page. All right, now to kick off the second half of this Sound of Cover Songs 2025, or just moving right along if you've been listening to the playlist itself because you don't flip playlists over, but I digress. I am going to stay in something that would be in the same vein as Morgan Wade's Creep. Now, at the top of the show, I talked about what I love about cover songs. And one of the things I didn't mention is sometimes a cover version introduces you to an artist. And this is definitely the case in terms of my next song choice. While I live in the US, I am a huge fan of Triple J's long-running show Like a Version. And thank God there is a YouTube channel that uploads all of these performances, because I have discovered so many great artists through the Like a Version series. It's all cover songs. And once again, in 2025, it happened again. And this time I was introduced to a group called the Folk Bitch Trio, which is also a folk group, well, no shit, out of Australia, who released their debut album, Now Would Be a Good Time, in 2025. Now, here we are towards the end of 2025, and I am just discovering this group because of their cover of Kings of Leon's Sex on Fire for the Triple J Like a Version series. Holy harmony, Batman. These three ladies can each front their own band and be the lead singer. Their vocals, each of them, are incredible. And then when you put them together, it is the chef's kiss, absolute perfection. Their version of the song starts off very similar to Kings of Leon with that overdriven guitar sound. However, beyond that, it is an acoustic guitar, the overdriven guitar, and these ladies' three vocal parts. And they take turns singing lead on it. But when their voices come together, it is glorious. Everything I love about vocal harmonies and then some. Their voices together literally made me stop dead in my tracks. It adds a layer that the original doesn't have, and there's less instrumentation happening. There is a power and heft to this version that completely blew my mind. because of the 3-part harmonies, there's a part of me that wants to immediately lean towards the Chicks. However, I feel like they have their own unique style and sound. It doesn't feel as country-esque as the Chicks do. This definitely feels more folky and more Americana-like. However, there's a heft to it. And I have not, as of this recording, listened to the album, but it has immediately been put in my queue because I feel like this is going to be a band I'm going to be listening to a lot in 2026, thanks to being introduced to them by a cover song. So thank you, Like a Version. Thank you, Triple J. And thank you, Folk Bitch Trio, for this incredible cover of Sex on Fire. You guys knocked it out of the friggin' park. But since I mentioned the Chicks, I feel like the next seamless transition would be to go to them. However, they haven't put out anything in 2025. That said, they have been covered in 2025, that being by Cody Johnson, who did a gender-flipped version of Travelin' Soldier. And when I look back at the songs we've talked about so far, Bowling for Soup, Morgan Wade, and Folk Bitch Trio have all been gender-flipped covers. Something I absolutely love, because right from the jump, you're getting a unique version. Now, depending on if the artist chooses to keep the lyrics the original way or not, plays a role into that. And that's something that Cody Johnson did in his cover of Travelin' Soldier. I feel like that's similar to how the White Stripes handled Jolene when they covered it way back in the day. I love that they kept the original intact. It's paying homage to a song that this artist loves and not changing the original intent. Now, that said, does it bother me when an artist gender flips a song and changes the meaning? No, it's all how they want to interpret the song. And Cody Johnson's version, it's a little more, I don't want to say rock because it's definitely a straight ahead country song. But Travelin' Soldier by the Chicks leans more towards bluegrass. And this one, I don't want to say is rocked up a little bit, but it's definitely more of a country song than the bluegrass style of the Chicks version from Home. And when you think about it, it's kind of the flip-flop 180 reverse of what the Folk Bitch Trio did to Sex on Fire. They stripped it down to 2 guitars and 3 vocals, and Cody Johnson added more to his version. But they're still showing love and paying homage to the original. I can listen to Kings of Leon's Sex on Fire, followed by Folk Bitch Trio's Sex on Fire back to back and enjoy it the same way I can listen to the Chicks' Travelin' Soldier, followed up by Cody Johnson's version of Travelin' Soldier. Yes, it's the same song, but in each instance, it's 2 very different experiences. So by playing them back to back, it doesn't feel like, oh, I'm just hearing the same song. I just heard that. No, it feels like you're getting something completely new and fresh, even though lyrically, it's the same. Now, he has been playing this song live for several years. There's a version on YouTube of him performing it from years back. I want to say it was 3 years ago, and it's got like 60 plus million views. However, he recorded an actual studio version of it now in 2025. So if you're wondering why am I bringing it up, it's actually released as a single in 2025. I'm not referring to the version from 3 years ago. Different performance, different recording. Him officially releasing it as a single gave me the out to talk about it here in 2025. And it's that good of a single. If you haven't heard it, I highly suggest checking it out if you're a fan of country music, the Chicks, or Cody Johnson, all 3. And as I'm looking at how this list played out, at least from Morgan Wade's Creep onward, I could have probably done an entire episode of country cover songs in 2025 because I'm going to stay with something that, in hindsight, I probably could have followed up Sex on Fire with. However, I didn't, and I'm not changing it because I don't feel like going back and recording everything I just said. Anyway, Folk Bitch Trio's Sex on Fire was a gender-flipped cover originally by Kings of Leon, and the Dead South did a gender-flipped cover of one of my favorite Concrete Blonde songs, Joey. Now, I might lose some people on this one. I'm not quite sure because the Dead South are a bluegrass group. And over the last decade and change, there have been bluegrass groups like Hayseed Dixie and Steven Seagulls that have come out and done tributes kind of with their tongue firmly planted in cheek. And they are of heavier songs, they're of rock songs, they're of metal songs. And while I love both of those groups, sometimes people, at least in the comments section, see them as almost a novelty act, and they overlook the talent that these groups have because they're doing songs like Thunderstruck on a banjo. And it almost, in that TikTok social media form, is eye-catching and becomes viral just based on that alone. And it's tough because when you think about Jeanette Napolitano's unmistakable voice, and you say, well, here's a bluegrass cover of it, it might be hard to sell, but the Dead South play this cover straight. They bring the darkness that the original has. Now, I don't mean the darkness I believe in a thing called Love the Darkness. I mean the lyrical darkness, the darkness behind the song's meaning. They honor that, and they play it in bluegrass form, but there's never a moment that you think that there's any novelty aspect to it. Now, I personally don't see that with a lot of Hayseed Dixie and Steven Seagal songs unless they're going overly into it, because there is a song by Hayseed Dixie called I'm Keeping Your Poop in a Jar. I think there's a novelty aspect to that song. And if they meant that seriously, well, that's a conversation for a whole nother episode because I don't know what to do with that one. And with Steven Seagal's, when you're doing metal songs in bluegrass form, people are going to see a novelty to that. And I think that sucks because you're overlooking such incredible talent. And I don't want that to happen on this cover of Joey because the original is powerful and it's moving. And the Dead South's version honors that while reinventing it. And that's a tough thing to do. And I am sure there's going to be some Concrete Blonde fans out there that disagree with this cover. And I respect that because this one is a big jump. The original has pain throughout the song. And when you go into that bluegrass sound and you hear the instrumentation, at first you might think those emotions are going to be stripped from this song. And it's the exact opposite. The pain from the original shines through in this version. I want to say in a similar fashion to the way the pain of Nine Inch Nails' Hurt shines through in Johnny Cash's version. While we're talking two different songs and two different emotions at play between Hurt and Joey, I feel like the sentiment from the original to the cover translates well across the genres. So you're getting a different version of that pain from the original, and it's done in such a honorable and poetic way. So if you haven't heard this, the Dead South's cover of Joey has to be on your list for 2025. And coming out of that, I think I'm finally going to move away from the country, bluegrass, folk, Americana stuff, at least for the last two songs here. And this next one, I heard for the first time, believe it or not, on Thanksgiving Day, during the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, when this artist came out and performed a duet, quote unquote, it's the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade, so no one's actually performing, lip-synced a duet with Whitney Houston. And I thought it was odd, but I was stopped in my tracks because I knew the song. And it was, I Want to Dance with Somebody. But it wasn't fast. It was now a piano ballad. And I'm talking about Calum Scott. And this version is on his 2025 album, Alvin Noir. At first, I wasn't sure what I thought about it. Because this is a song that for decades I knew as an upbeat dance song. And here I am hearing it for the first time as a ballad. And they only did like a half a verse and a chorus before they talked over it and moved on to the next thing. So I had to mute the TV and bring it up on streaming. Like I said, streaming does have its purposes every now and then. And I listened to it all the way through. And from the first listen until the probably 50th listen that I've listened to it this year since Thanksgiving, I'm blown away by this version. The original's embedded in my 80s DNA. I heard that song so many times on FM radio, I can almost feel like when I listen to it, I hear the FM radio static within the song. But here's this version where it's just piano and it starts off with Whitney's voice. And you immediately think, oh God, he went AI with this. And I had to immediately do some research. And thank God he did not. He did this the right way. He got permission from Whitney's estate and got a hold of the original vocal track, which, if you know the song, it's Whitney. It's unbelievable. So I'm sure there's somebody out there going, well, the original artist is on the track. Is it really a cover? Yes and no. There's been a lot of these over the years where they'll take an artist's vocals and turn out a dance version of it, but bring on another guest. Kygo's done it twice, once with Whitney on the remake of Higher Love. I want to say that was like 2019. And then a year later, he did a version of What's Love Got to Do With It with Tina Turner. Are they covers? Tributes, reimaginings, remakes. I feel like they all kind of blend in here. So if you're going to at me on this one, I understand. But this version is so unique. And it made me listen to the song in such a different way that I felt like I couldn't do this episode and not talk about it, even if there is an asterisk in the corner, because it's not just Calum Scott doing it alone. Although he proved during his verses, he very easily could have performed it with just his voice alone and done an incredible version of the track. However, the harmonizing between him and Whitney's voice really make this one special. And I talked about the harmonies that the Folk Bitch Trio brought to Sex on Fire. The harmonies that Calum does with Whitney on this version are gorgeous. And it takes a song that you think is an upbeat dance song and turns it into a song that could be used as a first dance at a wedding, could be used as a slow dance. It completely changes the meaning and intention of the song in such a beautiful, powerful way. And once again, it's an instance that I can listen to Whitney's version, followed up by this duet version, and I feel like I'm getting two completely different experiences. And that's what I love about a cover song. So asterisk or not, Calum Scott and Whitney Houston's I Want to Dance with Somebody definitely makes the 2025 Sound of Cover Songs list, in my humble opinion. Now, if the penultimate song of this playlist struck a nerve with some people, I'm sure my closer will too. And this is one that I watched live as it was happening, at least on a live stream, of course, as I'm here in the US. And this took place in Villa Park at the Back to the Beginning concert. And yes, I'm talking about YUNGBLUD's Changes, which was originally recorded by Black Sabbath. I've been a fan of YUNGBLUD since 21st Century Liability. I've talked about him on the Songs of 2025 episode that just came out 2 weeks ago. If you haven't heard that, it's a spoiler, but I won't say where I went with my pick because YUNGBLUD's done a lot of stuff this year. But that said, this cover of Changes that took place at the Back to the Beginning concert was nothing short of a career-defining moment. To me, it goes on the level of Hart's performance of Stairway to Heaven at the Kennedy Center Honors. Now, obviously, when Hart walked out on stage, everybody knew who Hart was. And that version of Stairway lives in infamy because of how Ann Wilson knocked it out of the park. The difference with this is not everybody in the audience, especially on streaming, knew who YUNGBLUD was. People in attendance knew who YUNGBLUD was because he is popular on that side of the pond. But he's still growing here in the US. And while he's becoming more and more popular, this lit a rocket under him here in the US. And while I don't usually like to dive into what people are saying online when it comes to stuff, because unfortunately people just love to trash everything online, and it's really toxic and really dangerous and something I'm just not a fan of. I actually wanted to see what people were saying. And as he was performing this, there was a ton of, who is this guy? Now, not in the way of in the movie Major League, when they were looking at the roster going, who are these friggin' guys? This was really, who is this? Because he slayed this performance and was blowing the minds of metalheads from generations earlier who are not fans of current music, and I'm not saying that speaking about them, I am saying what they were saying online, meaning I haven't listened to new music in 20 years, but this kid has something special. Now, granted, when you have Nuno Betancourt of Extreme on guitar, Frank Bello of Anthrax on bass, drummer 2 of Sleep Token on, you figure that one out, and Ozzy's keyboardist Adam Wakeman, the backing band is top tier. But if YUNGBLUD's performance didn't hit the way it did, it probably would have just been a passing song in that all-day amazing celebration of Ozzy's life. The last time the world would see Ozzy perform live. But YUNGBLUD's vocal performance was so powerful in this one. You could see why Ozzy was trying to pass the torch to him in interviews leading up to the Back to the Beginning festival. You could see why Aerosmith, Steven Tyler, and Joe Perry wanted to work with him this year. I understand why YUNGBLUD's polarizing, but he is insanely talented. Changes is not an easy song to sing. Ozzy's vocals in his prime is not easy to pull off. And not only did YUNGBLUD pull it off, he had the crowd in the palm of his hand singing along with him. And this version, after the year that I've had personally in my life that I've talked about on other episodes, it hit me in the feels when I watched it live, and it's hit me in the feels every single time I've heard it. We lost one of the founding fathers of metal this year, one of the most influential names in hard rock and metal, and during his last performance, YUNGBLUD put himself on a different tier by simply honoring somebody who he looked up to, and the performance speaks for itself. Grammy nomination for Best Rock Performance and all. And as far as I'm concerned, is the perfect way to close out the second half of this Cover Songs of 2025 playlist, which kicked off with Folk Bitch Trio's Sex on Fire, originally recorded by Kings of Leon, followed up by Cody Johnson's Travelin' Soldier, originally recorded by the Chicks, The Dead South's Joey, originally recorded by Concrete Blonde, Calum Scott featuring Whitney Houston's I Wanna Dance with Somebody, originally recorded by Whitney Houston, and YUNGBLUD's Changes, originally recorded by Black Sabbath. Head over to myweeklymixtape.com to hear all the songs I've discussed in this mix through the playlist embedded on the episode page. And now this is the part of the show where the conversation continues. I want to hear from you. I want to know what you think the best cover song to come out in 2025 was. Hit me up on email, myweeklymixtape@gmail.com. Chime in with me on social media at myweeklymixtape. I'm at all the haunts. You can also use the contact page at myweeklymixtape.com. Or last but not least, you can join the Mixtaper community at patreon.com/myweeklymixtape. It's free to join and chime in, and there's other tiers if you'd like to support the show, but none of those are needed to be a part of the community. I just appreciate the support that you are showing this program in any way, shape, or form. If you'd like to show some love to the show in a non-financial way, you can do so by making sure you subscribe at Apple Music, Spotify, YouTube, all the places. Tell your friends about the show. Leave a 5-star review or a thumbs up, whatever their rating system is. Leave a comment about what you liked about the episode or what future episodes you'd like to hear on the show, because that is how we keep this conversation going week in and week out here on My Weekly Mixtape. And I honestly can't wait to hear what some of the songs you guys come up with, because even though I am the host of the show, I am still trying to discover and learn about new music each and every day. And through the community over at Patreon, Discord, on social media, as well as the incredible emails you send me, I have learned about a lot of new music. And I thank each and every one of you for that. Keeping this conversation going, it means the world to me. My name is Brian Colburn. This has been My Weekly Mixtape, and I hope you enjoy diving down this rabbit hole of the sounds of cover songs 2025. I'll be back next week with an episode that'll tide you over until we get to 2026, and then the gloves come off, and we're hitting the ground running in 2026 with a whole new batch of brand new episodes, music discussions, commentary, interviews, and all the things that make My Weekly Mixtape what it is week in and week out. As always, I thank you for listening, and until next time, enjoy the tunes.